Hello and welcome to Atheists Talk cable program. Today is June 5th, 2014. I'm Brianne Bilyeu and I'll be your host for the next half an hour. Minnesota Atheists is both the producer and the distributor for this program. Our contact information will come up during and at the end of the program. This is part 2 of a 2-part program. So this is my second half an hour with Tim Stanley, sorry. He's here to discuss some of the current issues of the day having to do with reproductive health and abortion and Planned Parenthood. He is the Senior Director of Public Affairs at Planned Parenthood of Minnesota, South Dakota, and North Dakota. He is also the Executive Director for Planned Parenthood Action Fund. He has extensive experience in public policy, lobbying, and electoral planning, tax policy, and state and federal election law as it applies to nonprofit entities. He's a public speaker, an educator, and an ambassador to various medical, religious, and legal communities on issues of reproductive health, abortion, and sex education for nearly 20 years. It's an honor to welcome you again,
Great,
Tim.
It's great to be here, Brianne. Thank you so much for having me.
So in this portion of the show, we're going to talk about a couple things. One of the things, we're going to get to some of the state-level attacks on reproductive health from a legislative level. But first of all, I want to start with a happy topic.
Great.
Let's talk about Planned Parenthood's Day of Solidarity.
Sure.
Tell our audience what that is, what happens.
Sure. So the Day of Solidarity is held on Good Friday every year. And on Good Friday, for many years, the Planned Parenthood Clinic has been protested by our opposition. And every year, those protests got bigger and bigger and bigger. And we, being the staff of Planned Parenthood, would always have to debate, are we able to see patients that day? Have the crowds gotten too big? Are our patients going to be able to get in, et cetera? Are they going to be intimidated, et cetera? And so we, I'd say about 8 to 10 years ago, began working with the police department and the city of St. Paul to be able to figure out a way for us to respectfully allow the other side to have their First Amendment rights to protest the clinic on Good Friday, but for us to counter that with our own Solidarity Day with our supporters, and above everything, making sure that our patients had access to our clinic. And I think for the last few years, we have been able to work out a nice agreement where, the other side has their protesters 500 plus crowd, and we have our 500 plus crowd on Good Friday. And that still, anywhere from a dozen to 30 patients still are able to be seen every Good Friday at our clinic. And what we've done with the day is turned it into just a great Solidarity Day, as you mentioned, where we have our supporters marching in solidarity with Planned Parenthood, holding signs that say things that's or just signs that support our policies around sex education, around birth control, around a woman's right to choose. And that is just turns into a great day. We have, I think, just last year, we had about 850 people come over the course of the day. So it's a great day. We have great support from the St. Paul Police, great support from the St. Paul City Hall, and I know you've been there, and so maybe you'd want to say, but it's just a great day all around, and one that really unites our supporters and really gives them an opportunity to talk, to express why they care so much about Planned Parenthood, because Planned Parenthood for a lot of people is just a deeply held value, and people get it, they have this visceral feeling about it, and they love to come out and express their support for Planned Parenthood. And so it's turned into a great day. Now, do I wish that there were, more than just one Good Friday in a year? Perhaps not, because it's a tremendous amount of work to put it all together, to get the clearances, to get the permits, to work with the police, et cetera. And I'm sure the city wouldn't want us having more than one.
Right.
But one day a year, it turns into a great day, and we also are able to raise money from it too. We also do a Pledge a Protester campaign, and our supporters rise up and help us raise $25,000 as well for our clinical services. So all in all, it's a great day, and I'm glad you asked that question.
I've been going, my first one was when it was when the clinic was still on Forward Parkway in St. Paul.
Yeah.
And it was a very different kind of thing then, because we were right on the street. And I should say the Vandalia Clinic right now is amazing in the way it's set up, because it's really limited. It's made it such a friendlier place for people who are visiting the clinic, having to go into the private parking lot. And now the Day of Solidarity is in back of the clinic.
Yep.
So if you don't know what you're looking for, you might not even see it.
It's true.
From University Avenue.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, I've met the most interesting people there. People have been involved since the early years, since they've been very, very young, and now they're very, very not young, who've been doing this.
Yeah.
And people who have very compelling, interesting, funny, sad stories about why they are Planned Parenthood supporters, and it really is a celebration.
Yeah, it really is.
It's a
And
great
soon,
day.
you know, we'll have the, as we're recording here in early June of 2014, the Green Line, the LRT corridor, will open up in less than 2 weeks now, and it'll, you know, the next solidarity event will our supporters will be able to take the LRT there, and it should still be a great day. The only problem with April in Minnesota, as you know, or when it's usually held, is it's a little dicey about whether it's going to be warm or is it going to be cold or is it going to be snow or what. But anyway, we're always looking forward to it. It always is a great day, and like you said, it brings together generations of Planned Parenthood supporters, and that's just that's just a wonderful thing.
One of the interesting things is all of the different types of people who show up. You've got, I know there was a contingent from Minnesota Atheists there this past year, but there are also quite a number of pro-religious groups that are out there.
Yeah.
People of all belief stripes show up to show their support for reproductive health and for Planned Parenthood.
Yeah, yeah.
So I know that you're on our show today, but you speak to lots of people, right?
Yeah. Oh, right. So we have we work together for Solidarity Day, but also in general with a great group called the Religious Coalition for Reproductive Choice, and they have people of Jewish faith and Christian faith, and they have people of other faiths and Unitarians, etc. And they come and they offer a service for us during the Good Friday celebration or during the Solidarity Day, and they actually did 2 services for us this year. They did one at 11 o'clock and one at 1 o'clock, and they had 4 members of the clergy present, just very, easy to handle presentations on their positions, and so it was really just a nice thing. And then we had bands there as well. So overall, just a great day.
Sure. What do you think, if I can switch topics a little bit, the role of the religious pro-choice groups in our fights, either from a historical perspective or more recently now? We were just talking that people of all shapes and sizes and stripes and religious beliefs support Planned Parenthood. Right. What has the role been of religious pro-choice groups? Yeah,
so just going as far back in my reading of the history, especially in Minnesota, is that some of the earliest supporters of repealing of the abortion statutes or the anti-abortion statutes in Minnesota were, back in the 1960s and 70s, were led by the religious community, because they were seeing women suffering, and they thought that it sort of fit into the overall civil rights narrative, and they wanted to put a stop to that, and they wanted to lead the charge on trying to repeal the anti-abortion statutes. And so what I think is interesting is not only was it back in those days in the 60s and early 70s, not only was it religiously based, and that there were funds for women there were religiously based funds that helped women get to states where they could access abortion, but that also some of the earliest anti-abortion statutes were trying to be repealed by Republicans. That it was actually Republicans in the state of Minnesota that led the charge to make abortion legal, and that's a remarkable thing. We don't have that today necessarily. We don't have quite that broad a coalition, but it's an interesting distinction for history for people to know that the religious community and then the Republicans of the 60s and 70s led the charge to make abortion safe and legal in the state of Minnesota.
This is one of the places where we can have a great intersection as atheists, as non-believers, with the religious community, because reproductive health care is such a humanist issue. It's a place where we can all agree upon if we have comprehensive education and choice over our reproductive decisions, then people will suffer less. So it's one of those places where
it's a great point. Yep.
Cross paths. You mentioned safe and legal, and I want to talk a little bit about the perception that Americans have, maybe even we can narrow it down to Minnesotans, have, about abortion and about the restrictions that are currently being proposed at a legislative level. I've often wondered how many people in the Twin Cities even know that we have abortion clinics, plural, in the Twin Cities area, and if they know that we have protesters. We have an organized anti-abortion group, several of them, who are doing their darndest to demonize abortion and reproductive health care and birth control and things like that. So with the ramp up that we've seen in the last couple of years in anti-reproductive rights legislation and sentiment, it's important that we get the word out. And how does Planned Parenthood help us do that?
Yeah, sure. So, so there's no doubt about it that we have seen, that all the clinics that provide the full range of reproductive health care see protesters of some kind. Again, we have 18 clinics in the state of Minnesota, so not all of our clinics see protesters. I want to make sure that your viewers know that.
Right.
It's really, they are focused pretty much just at our abortion site in Vandalia, in St. Paul. And so, so what are we doing, to get that word out? I mean, for us, it is making sure that that we are out there in the community all the time, that we are seen as being, that we are not seen as being divisive. We want to be seen as being of the community, that we are out there nurturing relationships with the grassroots, that we are out at community festivals and fairs, and that our education ambassadors are teaching other young people how to do peer-to-peer counseling, that we are out teaching mothers how to talk to their daughters and fathers how to talk to their sons. So we want more than anything to be perceived as being part of the community, a force for good in the community. And I think that it's that ethic, that mission for the 80 years that we've been in the region that has just gives us the popularity that we have, that people again feel that value of Planned Parenthood very deeply, and it's because of all that work over the decades.
Very good. The PR battle's tough.
The PR battle is definitely tough. I mean, it is something. Again, I've been doing this for a long time, and there are always going to be this fight is going to be with us for a while. I mean, there's no way around it. You talk to some of the founders of our movement, again back in the 60s and 70s, and they would tell you that they were shocked that they were still having to fight for a woman's right to choose in the 1990s, let alone the aught years, let alone the 2014. So, and for them to see things like birth control become controversial in 2014, for there to be a major Supreme Court case at the Supreme Court about birth control access and about religious liberty, is just shocking to people. So anyway, that the PR battle is always with us and is unlikely to go away in the immediate future.
I think that we mentioned in the last portion the dips and valleys and the aggressiveness of anti-abortion legislation and activism, and I think that we're really starting to crest here because of a very important thing. Abortion is easy to attack because it's not an everyday issue for every person. But now that we're seeing attacks on birth control, that is an issue that is very near to so many people's lives. And I wonder how far we're going to get along that road before people go, whoa, whoa, whoa.
Yeah.
Shh,
yeah. Well, there's already been that
lay
pushback.
down
Been that pushback, and I think we've seen that. Honestly, I think we saw that in the 2012 elections. I think we saw young women and women in general rise up and say that Mitt Romney saying that he wants to put an end to Planned Parenthood is not a way to get elected president in this country. We've seen the gubernatorial candidates of Virginia lose very dramatically in an off-year election to be able to, because he wanted to close Planned Parenthood and restrict a woman's right to her health care options. So I think we are starting to see some of that rise back, but I don't know if I necessarily see it equaling a pullback from the other side. I think it's just our side having to be, being more aware that, this really is a battle, and we have to make sure that we fight to make sure that, again, birth control and full reproductive health care options are available to every woman without judgment and without bias.
Let's talk a little bit about the kinds of attacks that we're seeing now. We can get into specific legislation that's been going on in certain states, but what are the kind of attacks that we're seeing that would either try to abolish abortion altogether or do it a little more insidiously, chip away at it?
So in Minnesota, we're very lucky. I kind of consider Minnesota right now to be a little bit of an oasis when it comes to reproductive health and freedom, because we are surrounded by states that are not in our political situation, where right now in Minnesota we have Governor Dayton, who is supportive of women's health. We have a state legislature that's supportive, and we have constitutional officers that are supportive. So we're in a very good spot. But our neighbors to the south, to the east, and to the west, that is not the case. And in fact, it's completely the reverse. And so you see in Wisconsin there being huge battles over funding for family planning. You see restrictions that are meant to close down clinics. Same thing in North and South Dakota, and Iowa is even chipped in with a couple of harsh anti-abortion laws. So you see this chipping away, and in some ways it's more than just chipping away. Probably the biggest thing that we're seeing, not only in our region, again in the Dakotas and Wisconsin specifically, but also down south, is a law that requires doctors that provide abortions to have admitting privileges at local hospitals. And that sounds very, very common sense to a lot of people until they realize that the whole point of somebody having admitting privileges is if there's a chance of there being a complication with whatever they are, whatever their practice is, and with abortion there's very rarely any complications, and that all clinics already have systems in place to be able to make sure that if there were a complication, that woman can be seen at a hospital. The factor of admitting privilege is really just a way of putting hospitals in the position of basically eliminating a woman's right to choose in the state, because they generally don't grant admitting privileges to anyone who will not sort of in some way guarantee a number of admittances in a year, which is like the last thing you want to have from an abortion provider. So that is sort of it. And also the American Medical Association, the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists both say that these admitting privileges have no medical basis and should not be required. So they're in many states they're being litigated right now, but in Texas the law was passed and it closed down a substantial number of abortion clinics in the state of Texas, eliminating access for hundreds of thousands of women.
I want to come back to Texas, but when you say something like activists are trying to get clinics shut down, that's a very high-level description of what's actually happening. What we're talking about are trap laws, and I was wondering if you could explain what a trap law is and the kinds of nitpicky little things that a trap law might highlight or force a clinic to do in order to be still considered a clinic.
Sure. So a trap law is a shorthand for targeted regulation of abortion providers, and they are restrictions like the one I mentioned about admitting privileges, and that they are just targeting abortion providers. They are also rules that require, say for example, surprise inspections on an abortion clinic. Those could be written into law. Making sure, forcing a clinic to have hospital-like building codes. So having to have elevators that can, fit, gurneys and things like that. Making sure that they have air circulation systems that meet operating room standards. Those types of things that are written into law, that because the opposition knows that overturning Roe versus Wade is not imminent, but what they can do is pass laws that just make the provision of abortion very expensive to provide, or completely impossible to provide by virtue of these regulations. So essentially regulate abortion out of existence.
And again, it's abortion clinics that are being targeted. They don't go and require these same things for podiatrists or for gastroenterologists who are operating a small clinic. It's just because of the type of service they provide. Yeah,
exactly right. And that is very clear. And they very often will under the guise of women's health and things like that they'll pass these laws. But generally speaking, they don't get through legislatures and they don't get signed into law by governors who support women's health and that support Planned Parenthood. They are passed by legislatures and signed by governors who are antagonistic to Planned Parenthood and want legal abortion to go away, for the abortion to not be safe and legal in their state, let alone the country.
Mm-hmm. I do work as a clinic escort, which is basically a greeter, someone who will welcome with a smile people who are coming into our clinic. Yes, it's an honor. The vast majority of the attacks that I see on the sidewalk are coming from Christian religious conservatives. I mean, it's undeniable. It's in the propaganda, there's always references to Christianity and religious conservatism. But at a political level, we're seeing very different things. Most politicians are savvy enough not to bring religion in past the chamber door. So what does an attack on abortion or on access to abortion look like at a state level when you're leaving religion at the door?
Well, I mean, I guess it feels like it's pretty much, that they don't have a lot of to play, a lot of cards to play. They will usually bring in, what I've seen them bring in are testifiers to talk about, oftentimes from other states, to talk about things that happened to them at their clinic or at a clinic, perhaps an abortion that went awry, or perhaps a counseling session that didn't go as planned, something like that. But without the religious bent and without the support of religious groups, it would be my assumption that they really just don't have the ability to pass many laws, because they really are, generally speaking, entrenched in some level of religiosity. Now, let me say that I'm here talking with you, and and we're here as with the atheists, and we're, as Planned Parenthood, we'd go and talk to any group that was available to us, whether it was a Muslim group or a Catholic group or something like that. So we have supporters of all religions and non-religions as well, and so we are very appreciative of all that support. That being said, at the state legislature and in politics, there's definitely an undertone of religion when it comes to these things, especially around things like the personhood, which basically would give legal rights and legal definition and to a zygote, an embryo, a fertilized egg, and make that a real person. That is really, when it comes right down to it, a religious position is being pushed by religious ideologues.
Now, this might circle us back to Texas, where I wanted, where I wanted to be. But what do you think are some of the most dangerous precedents being set at a legislative level in areas around the country? Would you say that Texas's recent passage is up there? Or?
Yeah, I'd say Texas really stands out.
Yeah.
I'd say that North Dakota stands out, where they passed a law that was a ban on abortion past 6 weeks, essentially what they call a heartbeat law, which meant that that as soon as a heartbeat can be detected on an ultrasound, that abortion is banned. Yeah. Essentially, that's a 6-week, that's a prohibition after 6 weeks. But I also think a couple of things that are interesting happening in the state of South Dakota are ones that are really setting the benchmark right now. One is a 72-hour waiting period. Yes. So a woman comes into the clinic and has to be counseled and then has to leave for 72 hours. That is currently what is happening in the state of South Dakota.
And why is that so dangerous? Why is that so bad? A lot of people don't,
So in South Dakota, for example, there's only one clinic. So if a woman lives, miles away, if she has access to a car, that's great, but if she doesn't, that's a problem. If she has to take another day off from work, because essentially we're talking 2 days off from work at this point, it becomes a significant barrier. And it just also adds to the cost as well, with travel and everything else. In a vast rural state like South Dakota, that's an extreme barrier. But what I wanted to make sure that folks knew too is that, and kind of part of the overall sort of dangerous precedent, is they are also part of this law that is currently under in litigation, is that in the intervening 72 hours, when a woman, after she comes into the clinic and before she can have her abortion procedure, must see what they call a pregnancy help center, which is called what we call the CPC, or a crisis pregnancy center. And that is very troubling. And so that is currently under litigation, and I would, you never know how the court's going to rule on that, but that is something we haven't only seen in South Dakota, but that is a potential, real landmark piece of legislation.
Could you talk a little bit more about what exactly went down in Texas? Because there were a number of things that happened when that bill passed.
Yeah. So first of all, it was brought, huge national attention to the state. I mean, I don't have to tell your viewers how big the state of Texas is, but it's just enormous, of course, with millions of people. And so when the state legislature got when a woman named Wendy Davis, then state senator Wendy Davis, stood up to filibuster an abortion bill that had multiple pieces of legislation in it, in addition to the admitting privileges, a 20-week ban as well. The nation essentially just froze and watched in awe as she filibustered this entire bill.
The Twitter feed was amazing.
The Twitter feed was amazing. Barack Obama retweeted her. It was just a remarkable thing. And so now Wendy Davis is of course running for governor, and she is not running strictly on an abortion rights platform by any stretch. But it's clearly part of her narrative, and she can't walk away from that, and she never would. I think what's happening in the state of Texas is really remarkable, because it really is the ground zero right now in many ways for the choice movement. And I don't think honestly many people expect Wendy Davis to win. I'm not saying she's not, but I don't think many people do. But I think many people see that as an opportunity to galvanize the supporters of Planned Parenthood and a woman's right to choose, and be able to sort of galvanize those into an electoral into an electoral machine that will hopefully bring about some change, if not the governor's mansion, at least in the legislature, and set the tone for a state like Texas that is changing demographically, and has huge swaths of new Americans in the state, and that could change overall the political climate in that state. Now that's many years away, and I don't happen to live in Texas, but those are some of the things that I've observed.
So Tim, we have less than 2 minutes now. What are some ways that people can get involved if they want to help support the causes that Planned Parenthood supports? Yeah, well, great. Thank you for asking. The first thing, they could join you being an escort. That's one of the best things. But they can also come in and help us reach out to other young women and make sure that they know how important it is that they vote in the 2014 election. That's one of the biggest things that we're doing right now, and that is happening all the time. We also have things that we're doing around healthcare. We will want to make sure that everybody knows that we're going to be entering the second open enrollment period for MNsure, for the Affordable Care Act, and we want to make sure that all young women and men know that it's time for them to enroll in health insurance, and what the advantages are, and how they can get assistance signing up. So those are just 3 things off the top of my head that people can do. But if they're interested, come to our website, and we can get them involved. All right, thank you, Tim Stanley. Thank you very much for being with us. Thank you to everyone who's watching. Our contact information will be after the credits. Go visit our website. You can sign up for the Atheist Weekly email. We've got a Facebook page. You can request our sample newsletter. We'll send you a newsletter of everything that's going on in the community locally. Thank you so much for being with us. Nice job. Thank you very much. Thank you.